This is how we sew a welt pocket with French seams. I have the right side of my project marked. This will be the pocket opening. I have my welt piece, which is interfaced, and I have it marked on both sides. Start by lining up right sides together, and then on top of this, I have the pocket piece. This is the wrong side, this is the right side. Both sides have been marked. The right side of the pocket has the drill marks to indicate the pocket opening, which we'll use to line up with the welt piece. And I've cut this pocket to be 1 inch wider and 1 inch longer in order to accommodate the French seams. Pin through all the layers. We're going to stitch around this rectangle. Okay, so we're just going to sew through all of these layers. And I'll make sure to stop in each corner exactly as it's marked. And with the needle down in the fabric, pivot, sew to the second corner, pivot again. Stop in the third corner. Fourth corner, and finish off the rectangle. Next, we need to cut through all of the layers. We'll cut along this long line and cut up into each of the 4 corners. And you want to cut right up into the corner without clipping through the stitch line. And we've created an opening. Next, we want to press all of these seams really flat, getting them ready to be turned to the wrong side of the project. And turn all of the layers to the wrong side of the garment. Next, we'll form the welt by pressing the welt piece up towards the top and then folding to create the welt. And the folded edge of the welt will run right along the top of the pocket opening. There's also this 1/4 of an inch seam allowance that I've notched. I'm just going to press that underneath. It could be a little bit easier for you if you pre-press that before all the layers start going together, but not impossible to do at this point. So next we're going to secure the welt in place, but we're going to do that a little bit differently than when we're not putting French seams into the pocketing. Instead of peeling back this outer layer and stitching all of these layers together right alongside of that pocket opening, we're going to top stitch 3 sides of this opening. This is the first side, second side, and third side. That's going to secure the welt in place. It's going to go through all of these layers here. But we're not going to do this top edge yet. So I've stitched those 3 edges, and I've left some tails here for the thread. I'm going to bring them through to the wrong side. I'm just gently pulling on the thread that's on the wrong side of the garment, and I'm looking for that loop, and I'm just pulling it through, and then I'm clipping. Doing that again on this opposite side. Give it a gentle tug, looking for that loop, and pulling it through all the way to the wrong side, and then I'll trim. I just want to secure this folded edge down so it's nice and clean, so when we reach into the pocket we don't have a raw edge. But I only want to stitch it onto the pocketing layer. I want to make sure to avoid stitching through the actual garment. So I've moved all of my layers that I don't want to stitch through out of the way. They're just peeking underneath here, making sure there isn't anything under there that shouldn't be. And I'm just stitching along this edge as close as possible. And that's what that looks like. So next we want to work on closing up these sides with the French seam. So like anytime you French seam, you first start with wrong sides together. So I'm just gonna bring wrong sides together on one of the sides of the pocketing. And same thing on the opposite side. And since the welt piece here is quite a bit shorter than the pocketing because we made the pocketing wider, I'm gonna stitch with about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance because I wanna make sure after we trim these sides and turn it out to do the final part of the French seam that eventually this edge of the welt gets caught in that final seam. Okay, wrong sides together and I'm stitching at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Same thing on the opposite side. Move everything out of the way. Okay, so we have wrong sides together, stitched at the sides. Our garment is coming out of this pocket here. Trim off the excess seam allowance. And we're going to turn the pocket through. So we want to make sure we get those seams pressed out really flat and that the seam has been pushed out all of the way and the corners are pushed out as well. So now before we go to the final steps of closing this French seam, we want to work with the top here. To do that, I'm going to push the top part of the pocket outside of the pocket opening towards the right side of the garment. And I'm going to join wrong sides together. And it's going to be all bunchy at this point, but you just want to make sure to bring the whole thing out and match wrong sides together. And we're going to stitch with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I'm just stitching with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Wrong sides are together. I'm taking it inch by inch, just making sure to join those raw edges as I make my way down the length of the pocket. Okay, so I still have this poking out of my pocket opening. Before I flip anything over, I'm just going to trim off the excess seam allowance. I stitch this together with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, which means I'm trimming off about 1/8 of an inch at this point. Okay, now I'm going to turn the top side of this pocketing back inside of the garment, and I'm going to make sure to push out all of my corners and just pressing my seam open, making sure to just get all of these pocket edges really flat before we finish the French seams. I'm going to give my corners one more push through before I do the final stitching, but we're going to do the final stitch a 1/4 of an inch along this side, the top, and the second side. And that will be it for our French seam. And there'll be one more step after that to put the top stitching in the top part of this welt opening. A 1/4 of an inch seam allowance along the side of the pocketing. And then pivoting at the top corner. And I'm actually going to end up catching the seam allowance here. And I am stitching this top part with a little bit wider of a seam allowance because I want to make sure I catch not only that seam allowance from the welt opening that we cut, but also the welt piece on the inside so we don't have any raw edges when we reach inside of our pocket. And this is what the edges will look like when it's all finished. Final step we need to do is just finish the top part of this pocket. I'm going to start stitching right at the end of the stitch line, and I'm going to try to match these stitches. So I'm going to stick my needle right down here in the beginning of this final stitch here, and I'm going to do the smallest of back tacks, and I'll end up bringing the threads the wrong side of the garment. And right when you have that needle in exactly where you need it in that corner, you're going to pivot. We're just going to finish the top edge of this welt opening. The stitching is close to the edge without running off of it. Same thing goes for this opposite side here. We want to try to line up the stitch line and put in a minimal back stitch. Leaving some tails and then gently pulling so we start to see that loop being pulled to the wrong side. Bring it through and clip one more time. So now you see we have these really clean edges. You can see this top stitching that we did in the last step. We have a nice welt formed, and when you reach into this pocket, we don't see any raw edges. It's been nicely finished.